Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be looking at the Nuclear Revenge subreddit today. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into it. This first story was posted in March of 2023 by user WakeUpCall23. It's titled, "Ex-boyfriend violated me and denies it. I ruined his life. Trigger warning for sexual misconduct. It is minimized where possible while keeping the story cohesive. Double heads up, this is a long post." At the beginning of these events I am about to share, I was 20 years old, now 21. I was involved in a 5-month relationship with my ex-boyfriend, Jack X, who was also 20 at the time, who attends the same school as me. We started dating in December and I broke up with him in May. At the time, I was taking a gap semester from school for previous unrelated reasons to the events being told here and was instead working full-time. We went into this relationship both as each other's firsts. We were also subsequently part of leadership in a student-run group, with both of us being elected shortly before I broke up with him. This is a story of what happened in this relationship as well as afterwards that subsequently resulted in me ruining his life. I toyed with keeping the story to myself, but the closure from my experience includes getting it off my chest, and maybe some internet strangers can help me feel a little better about everything that happened. I won't go overly specific to try and spare my identity, hence the throwaway account, but anyone who knows of the fallout probably knows who I am. To those, I stand by my actions, and if my ex is reading this, you deserve so much worse than what you got. You are subhuman scum. Parts 1 through 3 provide context and a backstory that was abbreviated to get the gist across. Part 4 and 5 is where the revenge starts. Part 1. The start. I did not know Jack X at first before we started seeing each other. A mutual friend, Bestie, introduced the two of us because we shared similar interests. We hit it off and went on a few dates over the span of a few weeks. One night, Jack X came to my place, we watched a movie, and cuddled through the night. This was what I'd consider the official start of the relationship. We were seeing each other pretty much daily, even when he went home to visit his family. I lived within reasonable driving distance. The relationship moved in a way I'd consider relatively quick in hindsight. He also gaslit the words "I love you" out of me 2 weeks in by misshaping words I spoke into the phrase. Jackass X also mentioned shortly after we started dating that he had a previous ex in high school who was closeted, but the details I have are relatively faint. They were all disclosed by him. He mentioned that this relationship abruptly ended when the high school ex accused him of telling his friends, his high school admin, and his family. This reportedly drove my ex to therapy and ruined his social life. My ex swore up and down that he would never do such a thing to anyone, but he wanted to be upfront with me at the beginning, though we were pretty much exclusive at the time he disclosed this. I, obviously taken aback by this, didn't think that he was capable of something like that, and told him as such, and comforted him for sharing such a vulnerable experience with me. I largely forgot about this afterward though. Part 2. The relationship. When I first started dating Jack X, we discussed our preferences, what we were looking for, the standard relationship spiel. He told me he was looking for someone masculine, and I told him I wanted the same. We both assured each other we were masculine figures, but only one of us was telling the truth, which I'd come to find out during the relationship. He was honestly quite femme-presenting. He would say things even before we started dating that in retrospect seemed somewhat off-putting or outright manipulative without raising red flags at the time. Again, this behavior became habitual throughout the relationship. Shortly after I started dating him, I joined a student-run design group that Jack X was a prominent figure of. I had been exploring joining this group or one similar to it, but dating him at the time gave me the confidence to move forward with it. I didn't play a huge role in it initially as I was working full-time, but I began making acquaintances with those in the group as I was generally regarded to be a friendly face. Jack X had acquaintances in this group that he would make comments about that were vile and in nature. One of them was a mutual acquaintance to both of us, and the things he would say made me question whether Jack X was aware that we were in a monogamous relationship. These comments seemed to be attempts to invoke jealousy to me, but I never gave in. However, they only perpetuated the red flags he was giving off. Part 3. My own doubts, the break, and the breakup. I would argue my doubts began sometime around month 3. Some of the doubts that I felt involved the deepest questioning of my sexuality in my lifetime, as well as whether I was truly attracted to Jack X. I had a few people in my life that I had been attracted to for a while, and intruding thoughts of me being with them began to run through my head. The red flags Jack ex had displayed began to illuminate in my head, and slowly, these doubts I felt began to affect the relationship. I had never questioned my sexuality severely, as I kind of always knew that I was a gay man. I realized that I was starting to lose the spark I thought I had felt towards Jack's ex when we first started dating. He also started to become more aggressive in initiating / when I turned him down. One time when I declined, Jack's ex angrily looked at me and asked me if I was sure that I was actually gay. This question rubbed me the wrong way because I had long since shared my story with him about the discovery of my sexuality. I had known I was gay for 9 years at the time, though I had only been out for 2 years. Needless to say, Jack's ex slept alone that night. I worked to mend my side of the relationship, despite many challenges to overcome. The gap in compatibility was quickly growing evident between the two of us and started causing tension. I had mentally begun to exit the relationship, as I was beginning to feel guilty for not keeping him happy. Jack's ex also was insistent I quit my full-time job so I could go back to school and properly focus on it, and the job had started to demand more from me, up to 10 hours of overtime per week sometimes. I was steadfast on staying employed. I was a manager of a place I had worked at for 5 years. And this furthered the tension as he felt I was choosing work over him. Around the end of April, there were elections being held for leadership on the design team that Jack and I were now both a part of. They had an empty position for their treasury role, for which I had experience with my job, so I ran for the role and got it. He had been gunning for a project management role and was given it as well. This happened in conjunction with the relationship turning rocky, but it didn't seem like it would be a problem. It is important to note that this design team was quite important to Jack. He put a lot of time into it, it was his main thing outside of school, and almost all of his friends were in it. I wanted to make sure that I could help this continue to thrive for him, so I kept trying to mend the relationship, though it was slowly wearing me down. One morning in early May, as I was sleeping at Jack's apartment, Jack attempted to make a move on me at 3:30 in the morning. I, asleep at the time, because I had work at 7, told him that I didn't want this, and turned back over and went back to sleep. This seemed to stop him, but only temporarily. I stirred again at about 5:30 because I felt something on me. Jack was now on top of me. I tried to fall back asleep, but he continued, then proceeded to finish on top of me. I, disgusted, got out of bed and showered to get ready for work. He did not say anything to me in this time frame, not even an apology. As I was about to leave his apartment, he stopped me and said that we should take a break. I tearfully agreed and left for work feeling like I had done something wrong. The break was mentally relieving and challenging for me. I felt right being apart, but didn't feel right about everything that happened. I was still questioning my sexuality and was facing ever-increasing challenges with work. I was tasked with managing 2 departments at once and worked almost every day during the break. I didn't talk to any of my friends about the break because I felt like I was the one that caused it. A few days later, Jack called me because he couldn't stand not being with me and wanted to be together again. I reluctantly eased back into it, but had mentally known the break was the beginning of the end. At this point, he had moved back with his family about 2 hours away for an internship, so this post-break relationship was basically long distance. We talked. I told him I was going through tough times with the work to try to justify my off behavior, and he began texting me sappy daily messages which I largely ignored because they felt shallow and only made me feel worse. I responded to some of them and would pick up his phone calls, but this was mostly an effort to show that I was still alive and somewhat engaged in the relationship. On a Saturday morning, Jack called me super early and left a voicemail to the tune of an ultimatum, asking whether I was willing to make things work or if he needed to move on. This call was the final straw for me. I knew that this was when I needed to end it. I wrote a brief letter, called him back, and read it to him. I broke up with him over the phone. This was not my finest hour, but he left me no choice. He was entirely taken aback by me calling the relationship off and tried to ask me to make it work, manipulatively. I ended the relationship amicably because I thought I had done something wrong, and he agreed that we could remain friends. He called me early the next morning begging me to reconsider and that we could work it out. The phone call woke me up this time and I simply told him goodbye. I went to work that afternoon and had a mental breakdown. I felt guilty for the breakup and felt like everything that happened was my fault. I wound up putting my 2 weeks in at my job. I wound up staying and am still employed there unbeknownst to him, and texted Jack that I had done so. He responded that he was happy for me, and that is the last direct communication I have from him. Part 4. The Discovery. The summer was relatively refreshing for me. I began to work on improving myself, made some new friends, and cut back my work to a healthy amount, all while getting back to my school course load. I didn't talk to Jack at all during the remainder of the summer. In fact, I didn't even see him until late August, after fall classes resumed, when he passed by me with a new guy, New Boy. When I saw Jack walk by with New Boy, he pretended to not see me, but I couldn't hold back an ugly cackle. Jack clearly didn't want anything to do with me, but the cackle was from seeing Jack with someone new because the manipulative statement he had made when I dumped him became obvious. New Boy was not exactly a good-looking guy either, which only added insult to injury. A few weeks later, I had a falling out with the elected president press of the design team. I was tasked to compile a part of a report that required others to do their part first. This report was due on a day that I had plans that could not be put off, and no one did their part until the last minute. Thus, I was unable to do my part, and another board member wound up doing it for me. I was transparent with my plans and why I couldn't complete it on my own, and the board member apologized to me for stretching me thin like that. The president, however, was angered. She berated me and aggressively doubled down when I tried to justify why I couldn't do my part. The exchange drove me to nearly rage quit the design team, but I held my head up and instead got to thinking about a path that took the high road. One thought led to another, and suddenly I was thinking about why my relationship with Jack failed. We are supposed to be in correspondence with one another, but he elected not to work with me, which was partly why I couldn't do my task. I simply didn't work with him either. At the same time as the falling out with press, the design group had a photo shoot for all elected board members to receive headshot photos. I, not being close with any of the leadership, was mostly minding my own business. Jack, however, brought New Boy along to try and show off in front of me. New Boy was not in the design group. This quickly became evident when they began cuddling directly in front of me. This wound up being a bad call on Jack's part, as it only made me consider further why our relationship had fallen apart. In these thoughts, I thought back to that fateful May morning, and a terrifying realization came across me. The happenings of that morning were textbook sexual assault. In hindsight, I'm shocked I did not realize it sooner. I realized I was a victim, and it was hard to come to terms with it. I initially diffused it with humor in a weird coping strategy involving denial, but told some of my closest friends of the discovery so I didn't feel alone. I also pondered how I should handle it moving forward. I also had never returned the two things he left in my apartment, his key and a shirt that he really liked, one of his favorites. I threw the key away, and I wound up burning the shirt. He probably had his locks changed. Then the memory of what Jack said to me about his high school ex ran through my head, which I had initially forgotten. I had been put in a mental trap that Jack was not capable of misconduct, and this is probably why I had mentally blocked the realization of my being assaulted for so long. Given what I experienced and based on what he said, I cannot say that Jack did not his high school ex, and this terrified me. I knew what I needed to do. I didn't believe that approaching Jack was the best move, but I felt that I was under heightened pressure since he started dating New Boy and he could potentially do it again. Part 5. The reporting. Given that it took me over 5 months to discover the assault, pressing charges was out of the question. I needed some form of administrative documentation if I couldn't press charges, and I wanted this by the book because I was disgusted that I was so severely wronged. Fortunately, my school has a program for Title IX that handles misconduct, so I called them up and filed a report. In this report, I outlined in detail the happenings of that May morning and requested an informal resolution where my report was documented but an amicable agreement was to be reached between Jack and I. There was a formal route that could result in academic repercussions as it went in front of a student honor court, but given my lack of hard evidence, there was an extremely high chance of the case simply being thrown out like it never happened. The informal resolution still logged the incident just in case anyone were to report him again down the line. The advisor who worked on my case had to be impartial, but he was on my side the entire time and reassured me that I was handling it correctly. In this resolution, I requested that Jack step down from his role in the design group, apologize to me, disclose the happenings to any current and future partners, considered going back to therapy, and be re-educated on the concept of consent. I asked him to step down as the lack of communication between us in the team was starting to impact my work in the group further, but I knew that it would also be a difficult decision for him to make. This was intentional as I wanted the consequences of his actions to sting. The latter 4 requests were semi-filler but still had a purpose, including covering my bases while staying by the book. The requested apology was so I could feel some form of closure by him at least acknowledging he did wrong. The disclosure of the happenings was borderline intended to be a homewrecker for his new relationship, but also this is a reasonable thing to disclose to your partner. The therapy request was a low blow, since he claimed he had to go before, but a genuine ask, and the consent education was a dire plea, because if he can't recognize that being asleep isn't consent, I'm not sure what he considers it to be. Part 6. The interim and the report's end. In the midst of the report being filed and Title IX working on reaching out to Jack, the governing body at my school that manages student-run organizations deemed me ineligible to be the design group's treasurer. Their system is really backwards and their reasoning was stupid. I didn't have enough credits to be considered eligible. They demanded a replacement treasurer. Prez, who suddenly was nice because she needed something from me again, held a meeting and asked me if I'd be okay still doing my job, but just marking someone else down as the treasurer to satisfy the governing body. I agreed. Jack was in this meeting and quickly volunteered to put his name down with a smirk on his face. I, also smirking, said that was fine. Prez then moved to crack a joke. She started to say how it was funny that Jack was taking my position. She quickly stopped speaking, widened her eyes, and looked at myself, then Jack. Those few words told me that Jack had mentioned our relationship's end. The entire elected board was friends with each other, excluding me, and it also demonstrated to me that they were talking poorly about me behind my back. I firmly believe the comment she was about to make was her finding it funny that Jack was taking my position because we had previously dated, but she stopped herself when she realized that she was about to talk badly about me to my face. I smiled, feigned ignorance, and quietly dismissed myself from the meeting. Jack, on the other hand, was not staying in touch with Title IX. They reached him after about 2 months, and he initially admitted to the advisor that he did not disagree with the instances I described, but wanted me to know that he was learning intimacy. I politely told the advisor I could understand to a point as I was in the same boat as him, but that didn't excuse his actions. I also asked the advisor if he had decided on the resolution, to which he hadn't. The advisor then attempted to call Jack back to get a decision from him on whether he would follow my requests, but Jack began dodging phone calls for about 2 weeks. These 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. The ugliest parts of the relationship were playing through my head non-stop. I was drinking nearly nightly to ease my mind, not my proudest hour. I wrote a long, emotional letter regarding my thoughts that was subsequently emailed to Title IX. I did this to document the feelings I had while further strengthening my case, which to people outside of myself was relying on anecdotal evidence. I called Title IX back, expressed my concerns once again, and they thanked me for the letter because it provided additional perspective from my side. I requested that when they reached Jack to give him this ultimatum, if he was stepping down. I also asked they let him know if he chose not to, that I would step down, but be thorough in explaining why I stepped down. I worded it intentionally because I had begun to plan my exit with the design group and was banking on Jack valuing his pride over accountability. I was right. After those 2 weeks, Jack finally picked up and told Title IX that everything that happened was consensual. I am not stepping down, and that is all I have to say. Title IX immediately called me with this news. I was simultaneously shocked and not surprised. Even the Title IX advisor was floored that Jack had doubled back on his previous statements. I asked if the previous words and admission would hold up if I were to press charges, but because Title IX is protected speech, it wouldn't fly in court. I thanked the Title IX advisor for his help, knowing exactly what I needed to do. Jack had said the exact words needed for me to do my part. Part 7. The disclosure. The aforementioned call came to me at 3 p.m. on a Friday, shortly after I got home from classes. Less than 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the office of the design group's faculty advisor. I told him what happened and what I planned to do, including my resignation. Jack's misconduct had not only wrecked my mental state, but because I was outright afraid of being around him. I was hardly participating in the design group outside of my administrative duties after I discovered I had been assaulted by him. Faculty advisor was extremely sympathizing with what I described and directed me to hold a meeting with the elected board, including press, to announce my departure. He gave me otherwise free will to figuratively set off a bomb. I organized a meeting with the entire board for the following Monday, sans Jack, and alerted them that the meeting was important, all while keeping the operation under wraps from Jack. Come the Monday meeting, I had created a fun PowerPoint presentation that created a quick slideshow touching on all the topics mentioned above. The board arrived slightly tardy and were chattering amongst themselves until I launched the PowerPoint, with the words "Wake Up Call" displayed on the screen. I thought the title was clever. I started by thanking them for showing on such a short notice. I announced my resignation, a background of our relationship, what Jack did to me, and what I did, including making the Title IX report and what is involved by doing that. The board sat there in silence, absolutely stunned at what I was presenting them. I further went on to delegate my treasury duties, offering to assist anyone that needed it aside from Jack. I slyly mentioned that Jack was definitely the one responsible for my duties due to his quick volunteering before, and I looked at Press directly when I said it. The look in her eye at that moment was sheer terror. That moment of his volunteering and her comment afterward flashed through her mind. I paused for a moment to regain my composure, then continued with the presentation. It was a hard presentation. I held back tears giving it. They thanked me for telling them what happened, told me they needed time to process everything, but that they would keep me updated on what they chose to do. The board also asked me if I would reconsider staying if he stepped down or was otherwise removed, to which I told them no. My justification was that my impact in the group was too deeply impacted by his behavior and that staying around would only be keeping my wounds open. I left the meeting with a huge weight taken off my shoulders. Part 8. The last interaction with Jack. I walked back to my car after the meeting and texted a professional resignation message in the group's communication channel, citing personal reasons and wishing the best for the group. This would be the first of the communications that Jack would receive related to the meeting that had just happened. I directed any treasury concerns to Press while they worked to appoint a replacement. These communications were kept professional, as I intended to come out of the situation with grace. Any malice could have disrupted my efforts to be credible. I then drove over to faculty advisor's office with the intent of catching him up on the meeting that happened. I instead pulled into the parking lot to see Jack's car parked outside. I thought to myself, oh great, he's probably inside, this might be fun. Coincidentally, Bestie was also stopping by the building and I ran into her in the parking lot. I hadn't seen her in a while, so we hugged and I told her that I had just stepped down from my position and that I was doing pretty rough. My mind was still quite fogged from the meeting I had just left. I told Bestie that I wanted to talk, but right then wasn't a good time and invited her to talk later. She was entirely unaware of the happenings between Jack and I. She knew we broke up, but not why. As I turned to move inside, I saw Jack sitting inside his car, and I realized exactly what just happened. From his perspective, he thought he had dodged a Title IX bullet, just saw me hug Bestie, our mutual friend, and had likely been reading the resignation message I had sent. Furthermore, I was going into the building where the design group runs out of, which was, not proudly, a relatively rare sight. To top it all off, his phone was also likely blowing up from the elected board, calling or messaging him to figure out what was going on. Faculty advisor wasn't in his office when I dropped by, so I messaged him an update of what happened and sat inside for a minute to collect myself after everything that just happened. I then walked past his car to get back to mine, ignoring his presence, and I left. I couldn't imagine what Jack was feeling at that moment, though it was likely some combination of terror and shock. It selfishly made me feel good. Part 9. The fallout. The following day, the rest of the elected board reached out to me mostly individually to express their sympathy and check in with me. I had kept what happened to about 8 pertinent individuals in order to not paint the entire group in a bad light. I still wasn't sure if the group was going to follow through with the request that I made to remove him, or if they even believed me. Turns out they did. That evening, I received a notification from the elected board's group chat, as well as the group's general chat, with a message that tagged everyone from Jack, stating that he was resigning immediately upon facing immediate removal. He name-dropped me in this message and stated that I had made false allegations that were investigated by the school and dropped. They were not dropped. Title IX does not simply get dropped. He also claimed that he sought legal representation for the claims. None of what I did was illegal, so I call BS here, and stated that he was disappointed by his friends. He spun it as them choosing false claims over their friendship. He then somehow sent this message as an email to every person who had ever been a part of the group at my school. 700 plus people get this email with my name on it at 9:30 p.m. at night, and my direct messages start going crazy. Why did I get this? What is happening? I don't know what's going on here, but he seems like he's hiding something. These were just some of the messages I got. I responded to most of them by simply stating that no one should have ever gotten that email, but to not worry about me. But I was livid. Faculty advisor messaged me, he was livid. The entire elected board was livid and in shock that he sent that message. I messaged faculty advisor to meet the following morning so he could catch me up on the internal fallout I had missed. Turns out the elected board immediately reached out to Jack and said that he needed to resign or face immediate removal. Jack threw a tantrum and sent out the message, which he felt vindicated himself from any wrongdoing. The message made the board even more convinced that they made the right decision because they thought Jack was hiding something with the defensive tone he held in the email. In this meeting, faculty advisor confided in me that Jack was also banned from the lab space because of that email, which was extremely unprofessional and painted the entire group in a bad light. He name-dropped the group in the email as well. Because of the severity of the email and the now-on-record events that had occurred between Jack and me, the dean of my school was also informed. Faculty advisor reassured me that I had handled the situation properly and commended me for taking the high road. I had not once spoken poorly about Jack to the elected board, nor did I drag the group through the mud, though I very much had the opportunity to do so. I made him aware of the conflict between press and I in this meeting. I also spoke to Bestie that day, who also received that email and told her everything that happened. She had remained friends with Jack after our breakup, and she told me that he said I had ghosted him. She had not previously asked for my side. Remember those sappy text messages he sent before he asked if he should move on? Yeah, my not responding to all of those was what he framed as ghosting. I had responded to some, and I had called him in between them as well, so I cleared that air with her too. She was absolutely floored that he could do such a thing, but we reconciled over many questionable behaviors he had displayed throughout my relationship and her friendship with him. Part 10. Wrap up. With these events, I would say that I received my closure, or at least as close to closure as one can get in this type of situation. I don't think that Jack believes he's done anything wrong in this situation, but honestly, I'm okay with that. I simply stated what happened, and it caused a daisy chain of reactions that culminated in Jack losing almost every single one of his friends, his passion of working with the design group, and the space that he used to spend most of his free hours in, which was the group's lab. He also lost faculty advisor's respect, who is a very prominent figure in our school, as well as Jack's now former boss. The school is keeping an eye on him now while also potentially considering disciplinary action on him. When I say that the group was important to Jack, I mean it. When he wasn't in class, he was usually working in the group or spending time with the friends in it. I don't know what he is doing now, and honestly, I don't care. I don't see him around anymore. Remember New Boy? Allegedly, Jack was still together with him at the time I gave the PowerPoint. To keep my stance of being professional through my actions, I am not going to dig around to find out if that was the case. I don't know who the boyfriend is, and Jack does not have a social media presence. I could ask Bestie, but I believe that New Boy received word of the incidences I brought forward. I suspect that Jack may be single as a result. Regarding the high school ex, I do not know who he is either or if he even existed. This could have been a really screwed up lie that Jack made. I made my decision to report Jack in the first place by going off the assumption that what Jack told me was the truth, that there were previous allegations made. I allowed him to take accountability for his actions, but he instead chose his pride and ruined his life in the process. As I initially stated in the beginning, Jack deserves so much worse for what he did to me, and most of the karma he received was due to his own pride-sparing actions. I would have sent him to jail if I could have, but the evidence I held would not be strong enough to put him there. He may not presently believe that he has done anything wrong, but those closest to him know that he did, and to me, the social repercussions he faced seem like an almost suitable punishment. Thank you for reading. So there is a lot to digest here. There was a crazy amount of meticulous planning that went into this and just how OP executed their revenge. OP's boyfriend not only had to face social consequences afterwards, but legal ones as well. Just an absolutely shocking and satisfying story from the perspective of OP. Towards the start with the initial violation, I just had really strong feelings of sympathy and frustration, making the payoff all the more rewarding. Props to OP for sticking it out to the end, cause that was such a long and arduous process.